All right, so now we're going to go to the next objection on the handout, uh, which is about predestination. Now, it's something I didn't actually make clear from the last section a lot on grace and free will is why that should matter. And the idea is if we don't have free will, then it's really not up to us whether we take this wager. So you want us to have free will. And that's going to be something similar in this case of predestination. Now, a lot of you have heard that term before. Um, the idea that God predestines everything. If God is really, the creator of everything and knows everything that's going to happen, it seems like everything's predetermined. All right, so Rhoda's going to deal with that briefly in this section. Um, now, first thing he does is he labels something called the doctrine of unconditional election. So that's at the top, and I'll just show it here. Unconditional election. God chooses the eternal destiny of each person without regard to their future free actions. Okay, there it is. God chooses the eternal destiny of each person without regard to their future free actions. Now, this is a view that's held by some Christians, especially people from the Reformed tradition. Certain Presbyterians hold this. If you're a follower of Calvin or Luther, maybe Luther, I think. Um, Now, Rhoda doesn't actually agree with this, and that's going to come out in his examination of the argument. The argument that's on page, let's see, that's on page 75 right there. Okay, so you should read over that argument on your own. But he's only going to focus on premises 8 and 9, and that's all I'll focus on. So let's look at premise 8, which is if Christianity is true, then my destiny is fixed from eternity by God's decree and therefore is ultimately outside my control. Okay? If Christianity is true, then my destiny is fixed from eternity by God's decree and therefore is ultimately outside of my control. Okay. So, um, all right. So that's proposition 8. So I'm kind of working through the handout here. I told what is doctrine under unconditional election. I just told you guys that on the handout. And then there's the argument and premise 8. So what is 8? I just told you guys, and you can write that in the section. And Rhoda's just going to say he disagrees with this. He is a Christian, but he doesn't accept the doctrine of unconditional election. And so that's why he's going to disagree with premise 8. And in general, here's something that I think is valuable to do when you're evaluating a religion, which is um, each religion will have its core claims. Like in Christianity, it's going to be God exists and Jesus died for the sins of the world and resurrected and so forth. Um, Islam is going to have that as well. God exists. God revealed the Quran to Muhammad, and Muhammad, there is just one God, and Muhammad is his messenger. So now those are the core claims, and then there's going to be less core claims of the religion that people within the religion actually debate about, and one of those is going to be predestination. So Rhoda is not unconditional election. And so Rhoda is going to accept Christianity, but not accept unconditional election, and that's why he's going to reject premise 8. And the thing I would want to notice, if you're going to give arguments against a religion, you want to try to show that the main tenets are false, not side issues that not even everybody, not even something that at least most of the people in that religion agree on. Pretty much everybody who's a Christian believes God exists, and that's why Christians should take arguments against God's existence seriously. Not everybody who's a Christian believes in unconditional election. So, most Christians aren't going to have to take arguments like that seriously. And so Rhoda could just be like, yeah, it's true that if there were unconditional election, that nobody could freely, maybe he might say this, maybe nobody could freely choose the wager, but I don't believe in unconditional election. All right. So that's what he says about premise 8. And then he, on pages 75, on going down in the handout more, he starts to attack premise 9 on pages 75 through 76. Okay, what is premise 9? It is as follows. So premise 9, let's zoom in on it. If my eternal destiny is outside my control, then it's false that I'll maximize my chance of salvation by committing to God. Okay, and this part is directly attacking the wager. If my eternal destiny is outside my control, then it's false that I'll maximize my chance of salvation by committing to God. Okay, so given unconditional election, I can't raise my chances of salvation by taking on the wager. Okay, so what's Rhoda going to say about this? And here I think Rhoda's going to say premise 9 is false as well. Okay, so we can actually raise the probability that we attain salvation even if eternal destiny is outside of our control. And the way he does that is by appealing to what we earlier called epistemic probability. I've decided that this is important enough to write down. So epistemic probability. Okay. Now, at the top, epistemic probability. Now, epistemic probability, we already went over that in the introduction, but epistemic probability is just how probable something is given your evidence. Okay. So suppose it's true that ultimately you have no control over your salvation. Okay. Still, Rhoda's going to say, and I think this is pretty neat, but Rhoda's going to say, you can still commit to living a Christian life, praying, going to church, forgiving your enemies, loving God, loving your neighbor, and so forth. And by doing those things and coming to believe in parts of Christianity, that raises the probability that you are one of the elect. Okay. Now you're not actually changing anything, but by doing those things, you're actually making it more probable, given your evidence, that you're one of the people that was elect. Okay, even though you're not actually making any difference. So I think that's kind of a neat suggestion that he gives. If you think that's a good response, then good. If you think you have objections to it, again, that's another point to talk about in the discussion board. Okay, lastly, I'm just not gonna start a new video for this last part, St. Paul against the wager. I'm just gonna mention something about it, but then in the end say, I don't know of anybody who's really taking this seriously as an objection to the Pascal's wager, but there's this verse. Okay, so this is the last section on the handout, and I'm on page 76 toward the bottom. He says, Proposition 13, even if naturalism is true, choosing to live a devout Christian life rather than not so choosing wouldn't make one much worse off, all things considered. So if you remember that one box in the decision table, even if you commit to Christianity being true, commit to the Christian life, and even if it turns out that naturalism is true, you're still pretty good. You're gonna still be have a good life. Religion has a lot of good positive things for people. But then there's this verse from Paul in the Bible, and this is going to be on page 77. What he says in the middle of page 77, I'll just read it, is, if Christ has not been raised, then our proclamation has been in vain, and your faith has been in vain. If for this life only we have hoped in Christ, we are of all people most to be pitied. So Paul seems to be saying, look, if naturalism were true and Christianity were false, you would be pitied if you were to commit to living the Christian life. Now, I'm not going to go into the details. It's good, but I'll just note a couple of things that Paul points out. One is that the people in this situation were a little bit more like the people in a persecuted nation. The third option of the three different situations. You might be in a really good situation, like in America with respect to religious commitment, or a really dangerous one in a persecuted church, where the persecuted church is, and then something in between. So the early church was more in that situation. The early Christians were, often martyred or like fleeing for their lives. Okay, so Rhoda could point out that situation is different between them and for many of us. And then the next thing is, he could just say, that is a sense in which you are to be pitied. To believe in this stuff and then still be wrong, that is very pitiable. Okay? But I mean, Rhoda could still say there's still going to be other goods to this life for us as Americans if you commit to living the Christian life. So now, Rhoda says more than that, but that's about all I'll go through since it's a little bit less of the one of the main points about Pascal's wager. All right, that's all for this class, and I hope you all are doing well. Feel free to email me to let me know how you're doing, and keep in touch and add things to the discussion board if you want participation points. All right. See ya.